This is going to be an initial impressions video on my 2019 CRF450X. So I've had this bike only about for 1 month now and ridden it about 2 times. I just took it out today, got some footage, and wanted to discuss what I think is good about the bike, some of the things that stood out to me. Hopefully I can answer some questions if you're considering buying this bike or if it fits your riding style. So let's jump right into handling and weight. In this ride, I tackled various different types of terrain just to get a full parameter of how it performs in those various conditions. And what I found what works best for this bike is the higher speed, mid to high speed riding. Now, not to say that it can't do the slower speed stuff, but it really just handled well in the mid to high power range. Now, the weight of this thing, really, I can't notice it. And despite this thing weighing 275 pounds, it really doesn't feel like that. I think it handles its weight very well. And even picking it up, I've dropped it about 3 times today, and not a single issue. The performance of this bike regarding power is more than you'll need. I think for the average trail rider, this thing is honestly overkill, but it really has an immediate throttle response with that fuel injection. I came off of a carbureted bike, and that's one of the biggest things that I noticed was just how much more responsive the power was. So if you're not used to that, you're going to have to adjust to it, and I'm still learning how to control all that throttle response. But I think it really has its pros and cons. Really where I saw it suffer the most was in the slower wash riding, specifically the extremely slow, bumpy technical parts. And what would happen is the front wheel would come up and my hand would unintentionally blip the throttle and launch me forward, even though I didn't want to. I feel like with the carburetor, there was a little bit more room for error, so to speak. And with fuel injection, it's very precise. It's pretty much immediate in every situation. However, where I see this benefiting is if you want to get over a rock or a log, you can just with a twist of the throttle literally go up it, no problem. With my old KTM, I really had a hard time getting over rocks and logs and stuff just because that initial throttle response wasn't quite there. Suspension on this bike, really there's nothing to complain about. I am by no means a suspension expert, but I feel like it handles its way throughout everything that I did in my ride this morning perfectly fine. So I have no cons whatsoever with the suspension. I have to play around with it a little bit more, but it did everything really well. The gearing on this bike is actually really good and extremely versatile. I love the fact that it's a wide ratio 6-speed gearbox. The front sprocket is a 13-tooth and the rear is a 51. Which is generally a typical enduro setup. However, it did very well in everything from single track to 65 mile an hour roads. And I didn't feel like I was limited or revving the piss out of the engine on the higher speed stuff. It was just perfect. I don't think I'm going to change the gearing whatsoever for now. Another thing I liked was the fact that it comes with a digital tachometer and it gives just the right amount of information. It shows your speed, it has a fuel light, a neutral light, and a fuel injector light. Just knowing how much fuel you have left really puts my mind at ease on those longer trips, and I believe it comes on once you're halfway through the tank, so it carries about 2 gallons of fuel. The light comes on when you have only 1 gallon remaining. The fuel cap is also designed very well, and the tube actually rotates with the cap when you tighten it, so your vent hose stays nice and straight. Oil changes on this bike are also very simple and much easier than my KTM. It only has 1 oil filter and 1 drain plug, and that's literally it. One thing that stood out to me is that this bike doesn't come with a radiator fan, and that's worried me initially when I did a lot of the slower stuff, but there were absolutely no issues throughout the entire day, even in 93 degrees and above weather. So at the end of the day, who is this bike really designed for? Like I mentioned earlier, I think this thing really shines in the mid to high speed trail riding stuff. They built this bike for the Baja 1000, and I could see that. It's incredibly stable on those higher speed wash runs, and it maneuvers around the tight stuff as well. But where it really doesn't like to be is sub 8 mile an hour, rocky, hard terrain. I just think the amount of power the bike has and the immediate throttle response for those types of conditions makes it too abrupt and very difficult to control. Not saying it can't be done. I imagine if you have years of experience on your hands, this could definitely tackle some technical terrain. For the average guy, it's going to be a lot to hang on to. Overall, though, there's really nothing bad I can say about this bike. It performed very well in pretty much every terrain that I tackled it through, and I could highly recommend this to anyone in Arizona or anyone who lives in the desert area, because I think that's where this thing really shines. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good rest of your day. Peace.